Welcome back to Rod's Radios. This is part 4, the final episode of the restoration to the Telefunken Opus Model 8. And in this episode, I'll be finishing off work on the cabinet. I need to address the speaker system. There's a few jobs that need to be done there. Then I'm going to do a final alignment check on the chassis itself, and also consider and most likely build and fit a Bluetooth option to this radio. So, let's get going. In the last episode, I had started to varnish the cabinet, and by now it has had 8 coats, in between which was sanded down, to result in what you see here. At this stage, I started to replace some of the fittings. The side speaker covers, washed. The brass surround trims, sanded and varnished to retain the brass sheen, and then the cream plastic escutcheon as part of the front trim. Then the Telefunken logo was straightened and polished, painted in between the letters and covered with top coat also. Now, the speaker cloth needs some attention. While the speaker cloth itself was intact, it was pretty grubby in that you can see a shadow where the 2 speaker apertures are located and a dark, dirty area along the lower right hand side. So I decided to try a trick I'd used previously, whereby you apply a coating of shaving foam over the area, which should lift the dirt from the cloth. And here I've slathered a healthy dose in the hope of making it better. Well, that didn't work. It's not much better than when I started, even though I left it to soak for an hour or 2. So I've decided to strip away the fabric and start again with a new piece of cloth. As the shaving foam and the detergent didn't work out in cleaning the original speaker cloth, I stripped the whole lot off back to the wooden back plate here, and instead I'm going to fit this new speaker cloth onto the front to make it look a little bit more smart. It's still within the same sort of age authenticity for what would have been fitted on radios of that era, so I'm hoping it'll work out. So I'll come back when it's glued down in place. Glued and clamped, I'll leave it for an hour or 2 to let the contact adhesive set. Well, that didn't work either, but in this case it was purely my fault. I didn't wait long enough before joining the cloth to the back panel, and the contact adhesive leaked through to the front of the cloth, looking awful. So, on to plan C, another new piece of cloth. The speaker cloth I ordered from a website in Latvia arrived in today, and very fine it is too. I think this is going to be the solution I've been looking for. Have a look at it. So, I have to think about how I'm going to mount it onto the backboard. It's very squishy and movable, so to get the pattern straight, I'm going to have to think about how I'm going to mount it. Here I've cut off a suitably sized piece of fabric, ready to attach to the backboard. Now initially I was going to apply contact adhesive over the complete face of the backboard, but I realised that with contact adhesive it's impossible to move the cloth after sticking in order to get the pattern perfectly horizontal. So instead I attached one end first at the outer edge only and stretched the cloth along, then attaching it to the opposite outer edge. This allowed me to stretch the top and bottom sides before gluing onto each of those edges, thereby allowing me to keep a fairly straight line as far as the pattern ran. I could then affix the Opus logo and lower edge trim back in place. At this stage, I could turn attention to the speaker system. While I was waiting for some parts to come in, I turned my attention to the loudspeaker system, and to my horror, I found that one of the loudspeakers, the main speaker here, was open circuit when I checked across for continuity with the meter. I couldn't understand it, and I was horrified at the thought of having to find a speaker to match the other one, which would be similar. So I kept on poking around at it, and suddenly I got continuity. Didn't make sense. Was there something wrong with my meter, or was I not doing it properly? So I kept poking around at it, and then went open circuit again. Maybe I thought it was the meter, so I got another multimeter and checked it, and right enough, exactly the same thing happened. Sometimes when I probed here, it was measuring 4 ohms, 5 ohms. Other times it was open circuit. So I moved the meter around to the braiding that goes from the connection points here inside here, heading towards the cone. You can just about see the braiding in there. And the same thing happened, sometimes open circuit, sometimes reading. So I inspected it further and poked around here where the braiding joins the tiny little thin wires that go into the voice coil. And do you know what? Dry joint on this point here, on one of the points where the braid touches the very thin wire. So a little dab of solder solved that problem. And now the speaker's working perfectly. So let's have a look at the other speakers. This is one of the side speakers in this radio. There's one on either side. And this one is the what you'd call the mid-range speaker. And this is the electrostatic tweeter. And I know that tweeters that were made like this back in the 1950s have a foam surround inside. The way an electrostatic speaker works is quite different to an ordinary speaker where you have a cone moving in and out. On this you have 2 diaphragms separated by a mica sheet, and the B+ voltage is fed into the speaker on either side, on top of which the audio signal now comes in. So you have to be a little bit careful when you're working on this, because there is B+ on this speaker. And technically what happens is that there is a foam surround inside here that creates pressure when you put the cone on the back of it to keep the pressure between the 2 plates in between the mica sheet. And over time this will have deteriorated. So I'm going to take this off and have a look inside. And here we are with the cone taken off the back. The 2 membranes with the B+ fed into them are inside here. And this is the foam surround. And I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can have a look at the closer part of this. And you can see where this is already deteriorated just from taking off the back piece. And if I put my finger anywhere along the foam here, it just disintegrates to dust. And that's it. So these tweeters haven't been working for a long time. So I'm going to try and repair this by using this foam seal that I have here. It was originally meant for an electric hob to seal the underside of the edge against the wooden worktop, but it should be able to substitute for what was on it previously. This is no use at this stage, it's just turned to dust. So let's see how we get on with this. And here we have the new foam liner in place, and I'm going to replace the cone back on top, hopefully in one piece. And there we go. Push it down as hard as I can and twist the little tabs on the 4 corners to stop it coming out. Number 3. And number 4. And the job is done. With the backboard complete, I was able to remount the 2 main speakers on it and fit it directly into the cabinet. This has to be done before the side speakers are put on the side, otherwise I wouldn't be able to fit it. So that's now complete and in place. Let's turn it around and see how the front turned out. And here's the new look to the front. I think it looks pretty smart. Do you? Although the radio was sounding pretty good at this stage, I decided to check the alignment, And I found that it needed very little alignment, in fact. Now, I'm not going to explain how it's done because I'm sure you've seen it done many times before, and other people do it far better than I can. But essentially, you do the AM section first and then the FM section. The AM, I think the IF is at 460 kilohertz and the FM is at 10.7. And you adjust the IF coils accordingly to peak the signal coming out through the loudspeaker by putting a meter across it. However, there was a small adjustment that was necessary, and that was to the FM discriminator that is based around this valve here, the EABC80. And the way you do it is you get two resistors that match one another very closely at 100k each, and you connect them in series. And one end gets attached to a point on the can here, which is essentially the positive side of this capacitor. And the other end gets connected to chassis or the other side of that capacitor. And then in between the two resistors, you bring a lead out and connect it via a DC microamp meter, measuring about 50 microamps full scale. And the other end goes down here to this point coming out of the can here. And as you adjust it, you will see that the voltage swings positive and minus across this meter here. And you adjust it until you get a 0 point. Now, I did find it was slightly out of alignment and it did need some adjustment, so I'm glad I did it. But now the sound from this radio is even better. Fantastic! The quality of the output stage and the comprehensive nature of the speaker system in this radio make it well worthwhile to include a Bluetooth module to enhance the value of the appliance. And here we have the two little printed circuit boards that are going to accomplish this, as well as the little Bluetooth module itself. Now, the main board has components that feed in the 6.3 volt AC feed from the radio, convert it into DC, isolate it and feed it into the module. As well as that, there's a section here with a preamplifier stage amplified by this little op-amp chip, and that will equalize the volume of the Bluetooth compared to the volume of the radio. And my thanks to Manuel Caldera for his design of this PCB. The second little board, also from Manuel, is the activation from the Magic Eye, because it's desirable to only have this Bluetooth board working when the radio is not working. So the way it works is it takes a high voltage feed from the Magic Eye tube, which switches off when the radio is switched off, over to ground, and activates a relay, a little solid state relay here, and that switches the voltage into the main board here. So that's what we're going to do. These are the peripheral components that I'm going to fit onto the boards here. So let's get soldering. And here, by the magic of time travel, is the completed Bluetooth module ready to be connected into the chassis. Back with the chassis on the workbench, I did a final alignment on this set, during which I found that actually both IF valves, the EF89s, were weak. So I've replaced them, and the dial glass is back on the front, the knobs are back, so we're all ready to put the chassis back into the cabinet. And there we are, back snugly in place. Time now to reconnect the speaker wires. Here I'm testing out the electrostatic tweeters. As you can hear, there's only a very high frequency sibilance coming out from these speakers, but that's the way they're supposed to work. Now I'll connect up the main speakers. Well, here we are at the end of the road. Everything back in place. Let's have a listen. Medium wave first, and all we have here in Ireland is Manx radio from the Isle of Man and BBC Radio 5 on medium wave. Very little else, but this is what it sounds like.
Pleased during his appearance at Douglas Courthouse. Sean Carper has more.
The court heard Mr. Bree was asked to stop.
That's Manx radio. And up here,
.co.uk can check to see if your dealer.
oh, that's Talk Radio actually, that's another station. And
People are still in hospital after a total of 79 were injured. The BBC's Rowan Bridge is in.
That's BBC Radio 5. And on Longwave, we may be able to get some BBC Radio 4.
Has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. During respondent admitted assaulting a refugee on duty.
Yes, but again, only a very noisy reception from the UK. But where this radio really shines is on FM.
Loudline on RTE Radio 1, sponsored by Harry Curry. Revamp your home this with our fresh new curtain embedding design. Discover comfort and style for every room.
Across weekends, Junior Minister Sean Canny says the situation is unacceptable.
The Government's Media Committee this afternoon, General of RTE Kevin Backhurst has.
When I happened in the creative team, yeah, there's the scene was written completely different.
Have the same opportunities and the same kind of,
Formerly known as Gary O'Flynn of Melvindale House, Coolow and Blarney, appeared before Cork District Court, having previously pleaded guilty to.
And brother, 23-year-old, was killed in a hit and run outside Carrickwood.
CarsIreland.ie, a site for buying and selling cars in Ireland.
Court of Justice. So in Ireland we have about 900 members, both hotel and guest houses.
It needs to be treated more seriously.
I feel that it's hugely minimised.
The shop's picking up a few bits, then suddenly, you're a millionaire! All Cash Millionaire is the new...
So, plenty of stations on FM. And of course, in this radio, I've put a Bluetooth module. So let's see how that sounds. So we switch over to what would have been the Gram switch on the front here. The magic eye disappears because we've now switched on automatically the Bluetooth module. And here I have on my iPad some music. Let's see how this sounds.
Meet me at the station underneath the clock. Carry an umbrella, no need to talk. The man in the humbug hiding in the fog will be watching. Get yourself a ticket, go through the gate. It's 7:45 precisely, don't be late.
So that's it. This radio sounds fantastic. And I know you won't get a sense of this across the YouTube algorithm, but it sounds really good here. The fidelity is really high. So I'm very pleased with the outcome of this project. And finally, if you have been, thanks for watching.